The crystal chandelier above table 7 had witnessed 1,000 meals, but never one that ended quite like this. Laurent Beaumont's hand was already reaching for his Hermès briefcase when the words left his mouth, sharp, cutting French that sliced through the ambient noise of Maison Azure like a blade through silk. Inacceptable. Absolument inacceptable. His voice carried the particular disdain that only old money could perfect, each syllable dripping with generations of Parisian superiority. The dining room fell into that peculiar hush that follows public humiliation. 63 patrons, their forks suspended mid-air, their conversations dying on their lips. The maître d', Marcus Chen, stood frozen near the kitchen doors, his face flushed the color of the burgundy napkins folded into swans at each table. He'd been in the hospitality industry for 17 years, had weathered every storm from kitchen fires to celebrity meltdowns. But this French billionaire, with his impeccable suit and devastating critique, had reduced him to a stammering boy on his first day. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue creating content like this. Now, let's see what happens next. Laurent continued his tirade, switching between French and English with the fluid arrogance of someone who'd never had to choose just one language. I have dined at Le Bernardin, at l'Arpège, at establishments your staff could only dream of entering as guests, and this, he gestured at the plate before him with the kind of dismissive wave usually reserved for something found on a shoe. This is what you dare to call cuisine française? Emma Rose Whit stood 3 tables away, a tray of desserts balanced on her left palm. She'd been working at Maison Azure for 4 months now, ever since she'd arrived in Seattle with nothing but 2 suitcases and a heart full of holes she was trying to stitch back together. She was 28 years old, though some days she felt ancient, worn down by a life that had taken more than it had given. Her hair, the color of chestnuts in autumn light, was pulled back in the regulation bun that always gave her a headache by hour 6 of her shift. Her uniform, black dress, white apron, sensible shoes that squeaked slightly on the marble floors, was identical to every other server's, but something about the way she carried herself suggested she was merely borrowing these clothes, that somewhere in a past life she'd worn something entirely different. She watched Laurent Beaumont rise from his seat, watched him toss his platinum card onto the table with theatrical disgust. He was perhaps 55, with silver threading through his dark hair in that way that looked distinguished on men and merely aging on women. His suit probably cost more than Emma made in 6 months. His watch, she recognized it as a Patek Philippe, the kind her father used to admire in magazine spreads before everything fell apart, caught the light and threw small rainbows across the white tablecloth. "Monsieur, please," Marcus was saying, his hands raised in supplication. "If there's anything we can do to—" "Do?" Laurent's laugh was hollow, bitter. "You can do nothing. I came to Seattle on recommendation, was told that Maison Azure understood French cuisine, understood the soul of real cooking. Instead, I find this American interpretation. Pretty plates, no passion. Beautiful presentation, no poetry. You have murdered bouillabaisse and called it innovation." Emma felt something stir in her chest, a moth beating against glass, desperate for light. She knew she should stay silent, should let Marcus handle this disaster. In 4 months of work, she'd perfected the art of invisibility. She took orders, delivered plates, collected tips, and disappeared into the background of other people's lives. That was the agreement she'd made with herself when she'd fled from Boston. No more standing out, no more being seen, no more pretending to be someone she wasn't. But Laurent Beaumont was speaking French, real French, the kind she hadn't heard since her mother died, the kind that tasted like childhood summers in Provence, like her grandmother's kitchen in Lyon, like the year she'd spent at the Sorbonne before everything collapsed. And he was wrong. Not about the food necessarily. Maison Azure's bouillabaisse was indeed a pale shadow of the real thing, but about the why of it, about the heart of what had gone wrong. She set down her tray of desserts on table 4's empty surface. Her hands were steady, though her pulse had begun to race. Across the dining room, she could see Chef David through the kitchen window, his face red with anger and embarrassment. He was a good man, talented but not inspired, the kind of chef who followed recipes but never wrote his own. She'd noticed in her 4 months here that he approached French cuisine like a translator working with a dictionary, getting the words right, but missing the music. Laurent was buttoning his coat now, preparing to leave. His assistant, a thin woman with severe glasses and a tablet, was already calling for their car. Marcus looked like he might weep or vomit, or both. The general manager, Sandra Cho, had emerged from her office and was speed-walking across the dining room, her heels clicking an anxious rhythm. Emma moved before she could talk herself out of it. She crossed the 20 feet between table 4 and table 7 like she was walking through water, each step requiring enormous effort. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to return to her shadows and her safety. But her mother's voice was in her head. Her mother, who'd been a chef, who'd taught Emma to taste the world, who died when Emma was 19 and left her with recipes written in margins and memories flavored with saffron and love.
Monsieur Beaumont, Emma said, and the words came out in French, perfect and fluid, with the slight Lyonnaise accent she'd inherited from summer visits to her grandmother. Vous avez raison sur la bouillabaisse, mais vous avez tort sur les raisons. You're right about the bouillabaisse, but you're wrong about the reasons. Laurent froze, actually froze, his hands still on the back of his chair, his entire body going still like someone had pressed pause on a film. He turned slowly, and his eyes, they were gray, Emma noticed, the color of Paris in winter, fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. But she'd started now, had stepped out of her shadows, and there was no going back. "I beg your pardon?" he said, still in French, his voice dangerous and curious in equal measure. The dining room had gone from quiet to absolutely silent. Emma was aware of Sandra staring at her, of Marcus's mouth hanging open, of the other servers backing away like she'd just grabbed a live wire. She probably had. She was going to get fired for this. She was definitely going to get fired for this. But she continued anyway, the French flowing from her lips like it had been waiting 4 months to escape. The bouillabaisse is wrong not because the chef doesn't care, but because he's trying to please Americans who think they want French food but actually want their own comfort wrapped in French words. He's been told by consultants and critics and management to make it accessible, to reduce the saffron because Americans find it too strong, to remove the rouille because customers complained about the garlic, to use halibut instead of rascasse because no one here knows what a scorpion fish is and the name frightens them. Laurent's eyebrows had climbed his forehead. His assistant had stopped tapping on her tablet. Sandra looked like she was calculating how quickly she could fire Emma and have security escort her from the building. "You speak French," Laurent said, and it wasn't a question but an accusation, like she'd been hiding something dangerous. "My mother was from Lyon," Emma replied, still in French. "My father met her when he was studying there. I spent every summer until I was 15 in Provence. My grandmother taught me to make bouillabaisse when I was 8 years old, the real kind, with rascasse and grandin and Saint-Pierre, with saffron threads we bought from the market in Marseille, with the soup served separately from the fish, with rouille spread thick on grilled bread rubbed with garlic." Something shifted in Laurent's face. The anger didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. He pulled out his chair and sat back down. His assistant looked confused. Marcus looked terrified. Sandra looked like she was ready to intervene. "Continue," Laurent said, gesturing at the empty chair across from him. Emma knew she shouldn't sit, knew she was already in so much trouble that sitting would only add fuel to the fire. But she was tired of hiding, tired of being invisible, tired of pretending she was just a waitress with no past and no passion. So she sat. She sat at table 7 with a French billionaire, while her manager watched in horror and her career at Maison Azure breathed its final breaths. "The problem isn't the chef's skill," Emma continued, her French gaining confidence as she went. "Chef David trained at the Culinary Institute, has worked in 4-star restaurants from New York to San Francisco. The problem is that he's been told to make French food that Americans will actually eat, And Americans, with respect, have been trained by chains and fast casual restaurants to expect certain things. They want their fish filleted cleanly, no bones, no head, nothing that reminds them that it once swam in the ocean. They want their soup smooth and mild, nothing too aggressive, nothing that challenges. They want their garlic subtle, their saffron mere coloring, their flavors polite. Laurent's eyes were leaning forward now, his earlier fury transforming into engaged attention. And you think this is wrong? I think it's sad, because bouillabaisse isn't polite. It's a fisherman's stew, born from poverty and necessity, made from the catch that was too ugly or too bony to sell at market. It's supposed to be fierce and bold and uncompromising. It's supposed to taste like the Mediterranean Sea at dawn, like sun and salt and survival. Making it polite is like translating Baudelaire into greeting card poetry. The words might be technically correct, but the soul is gone.
Laurent studied her for a long moment. His fingers drummed once on the tablecloth, then stilled. "You're a waitress," he said, and there was something almost sad in the observation. "Yes, but you speak like someone who knows food, who understands it, who loves it." Emma's throat tightened. "My mother was a chef. She taught me everything. She died when I was 19. The words sat between them, heavy and true. Laurent nodded slowly, like he understood things Emma hadn't said. "And your father?" "Gone." The word was clipped, final. She didn't elaborate, didn't mention the scandal that had destroyed her father's reputation, the embezzlement charges that had sent him to prison, the media circus that had turned their family name into a punchline, the way she'd had to change her last name from Whitmore Beauchamp to just Whitmore to escape the Google searches and the judgment. Laurent seemed to hear what she didn't say. He glanced at his watch, that impossibly expensive Patek Philippe, and then at his assistant. "Margot, cancel the car, and call Sebastian. Tell him I'll be delayed." "Monsieur?" Margot looked confused. "Tell him something interesting has happened." Laurent turned back to Emma, and his gray eyes held a challenge. "You say Chef David knows how to cook but has been constrained. You say the bouillabaisse could be good if made properly. Prove it." Emma blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Prove it. Make me bouillabaisse, real bouillabaisse, the kind your grandmother made, the kind that tastes like the Mediterranean at dawn." He glanced at his watch again. "You have 2 hours." The request landed in the dining room like a stone in still water, sending ripples in every direction. Sandra was moving now, crossing to table 7 with the determined stride of someone about to shut down a mutiny. "Mr. Beaumont, I'm so sorry, but our servers aren't authorized to—" "How much?" Laurent cut her off, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. "I'm sorry? How much would you close the restaurant for 2 hours and let this woman use your kitchen?" Sandra's mouth opened and closed. She could see her doing the math. Evening service at Maison Azure could pull in $20,000 on a good night, but Laurent Beaumont was the kind of billionaire whose goodwill could be worth much more. His review could make or break restaurants across 3 continents. He owned hotels, casinos, a vineyard in Bordeaux, and a stake in 2 Michelin-starred establishments in Paris. That would be highly unusual," Sandra stammered. $50,000, Laurent said calmly, "for 2 hours, and whatever ingredients she needs." The number seemed to suck the air from the room. Emma's hands had gone numb. $50,000. That was more than she made in a year. That was enough to pay off her student loans, to maybe, just maybe, start over somewhere new, to stop running from her past. But it was also impossible. She hadn't cooked a real meal in years, hadn't trusted herself to create anything after watching her father destroy everything her family had built. She was a waitress now, safe, invisible, unimportant. Her mother's voice again, clear as a bell. "Emma chérie, food is not about perfection. It's about the truth, about putting your heart on a plate and saying, 'This is who I am, this is what I love, this is what matters.'" Emma stood. Her legs felt shaky, but her voice came out steady.
I'll need rascasse, or at least 3 types of firm white fish, saffron threads, real ones, not powder, fresh tomatoes, fennel, onions, garlic, lots of garlic, orange zest, herbs from the market, not dried. And for the roulis, I'll need red peppers, more garlic, good olive oil, bread from a real bakery, not the par-baked stuff you serve here.
Laurent's smile was slow, like sunrise. Chef David, do you object to someone using your kitchen? Chef David, still visible through the kitchen window, looked like he couldn't decide whether to be relieved or offended. Finally, he shrugged. If she can make this guy happy, she can use whatever she wants. Sandra still looked like she might faint, but the promise of $50,000 was powerful persuasive. Fine. 2 hours. But Emma, if this goes wrong... If this goes wrong, you can fire me, Emma said simply. I know. She was already mentally running through her grandmother's recipe, the one she'd watched dozens of times, the one she'd helped with as a child, stirring the pot while her grandmother told stories about the old days in Marseille, about making soup from fish heads and tails, about feeding 6 children on nothing but what the sea provided and what love could transform. She looked at Laurent, who was settling back into his chair like he'd just purchased a ticket to a show he couldn't miss. 2 hours, she said in French, and you have to trust me. No complaints, no critiques until you've tasted the final dish, the real dish, the way it's meant to be. Agreed, Laurent said. But if it's not perfect, if it's not real, then you owe me an apology and an explanation for why you wasted my time with pretty words. Emma nodded. Her heart was hammering, but underneath the fear was something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Excitement, purpose, the dangerous, intoxicating thrill of caring about something again. She turned toward the kitchen, and as she did, she caught a glimpse of herself in one of the mirrors that lined the dining room walls. For the first time in 4 months, she looked alive, terrified, but alive. Marcus caught her arm as she passed. Emma, what are you doing? You're gonna get fired. We're both gonna get fired. Maybe. But at least we'll go down doing something interesting. She pushed through the kitchen doors, and the heat hit her like a wall. The familiar, comforting warmth of a working kitchen, the smell of oil and garlic and possibility. The line cook stared at her. Chef David stood by the pass, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I need your best prep cook. I need someone who can move fast and follow instructions exactly, and I need everyone else to stay out of my way. Chef David studied her for a long moment, then nodded at a young man with tattoos covering both arms. Rodriguez, you're with her. The rest of you, keep working on regular service, but give her Station 3 and whatever ingredients she asks for. Rodriguez, he looked maybe 22, nervous but eager, came to her side. What are we making? Bouillabaisse, real bouillabaisse, the kind that could make a French billionaire cry or get us both thrown out on the street. Cool, Rodriguez said, grinning. Always wanted to go out in the blaze of glory. Emma laughed despite herself, and the sound felt rusty, unused. She grabbed an apron from the hook by the door and tied it around her waist, and for the first time in almost a decade, she felt like she was standing in the right place. The clock on the wall said 7:47 p.m. She had until 9:47 to make something true, something real, something that tasted like memory and love and the Mediterranean at dawn. She took a breath, rolled up her sleeves, and began. The morning had started like every morning for the past 4 months. Emma's alarm screaming at 5:30 a.m., her hands slapping it silent, her body protesting as she dragged herself from the mattress on the floor of her studio apartment. The apartment was in Belltown, on a street where ambulance sirens formed a nighttime lullaby, and the smell of frying fish from the restaurant below seeped through the floorboards. It cost $1,500 a month, which was cheap by Seattle standards and still more than Emma could comfortably afford. Her furniture consisted of the mattress, a folding card table she'd found on the street, 1 chair with a wobbly leg, and a lamp from Goodwill. She moved here with 2 suitcases and a promise to herself. No more pretending, no more trying to be someone she wasn't, no more chasing dreams that would only collapse like everything else in her life had collapsed. The bathroom mirror showed her a face she was still getting used to. No makeup, hair pulled back tight,
eyes that had learned to look past things rather than at them. She'd been pretty once, in that effortless way some young women are, when everything is still possible and the future looks like a door opening rather than closing. Her mother used to say she had her grandmother's eyes, dark brown and thoughtful, the kind that noticed things. Her father used to say she had his stubborn chin, though after the scandal, after the trial, after everything fell apart, she'd stopped thinking of her father at all if she could help it. She showered in water that never quite got hot enough, dressed in jeans and sweater, and made coffee in the French press that was the only thing she'd kept from her old life. The press had been her mother's, was maybe 40 years old, its metal frame dented and worn. Every morning, Emma went through the ritual her mother had taught her. Boil the water to exactly 200 degrees, grind the beans fresh, bloom them first, then pour slowly, press after 4 minutes. It was the one thing she still did right, the one connection to her past she allowed herself. The coffee tasted like a memory, like her mother's kitchen in their Boston townhouse, before everything went wrong. Like Saturday mornings when her father was still a respected investment banker and her mother ran a small catering company that was starting to gain attention from the city's elite. Like the year Emma was 17 and believed she might actually become a chef, might actually be good at something, might actually matter. She drank the coffee standing at her window, looking down at the street 3 floors below. A homeless man was setting up his usual spot by the corner, spreading out cardboard and a sleeping bag. Emma had learned his schedule over the months. He arrived at 6 a.m., left by 8 a.m., presumably to somewhere warmer, or at least more profitable for panhandling. Sometimes she brought him coffee and a breakfast sandwich. She couldn't afford it, but she did it anyway, because forgetting you were human seemed like the most dangerous thing you could do. By 6:15, she was on the bus heading toward downtown. The morning commuters surrounded her, tech workers with their earbuds and their obliviousness, service workers like herself with their tired eyes and their resignation, a few students from Seattle University with their backpacks and their beautiful, terrible assumption that life would work out the way they planned. Emma always found a seat near the back if she could, always kept her eyes on her phone or a book, always avoided conversation. She'd become good at being invisible. The bus dropped her at Pike Place Market at 6:45. She had time before her shift started at Maison Azure, and she used it the way she'd used it every day for 4 months, walking through the market, watching the vendors set up their stalls, reminding herself why she'd given up on cooking. The fish at Pike Place were beautiful, their scales still gleaming with ocean water, their eyes not yet clouded by time. The produce vendors called out in a dozen languages, offering samples of apples and cherries and peaches, depending on the season. The flower stalls exploded with color, dahlias and roses and sunflowers and eucalyptus. Emma walked through it all like a ghost, looking but not touching, seeing but not feeling. It hurt too much to feel, because every perfectly ripe tomato reminded her of her mother teaching her to make sauce, insisting they squeeze each tomato to test for firmness, explaining how the best ones felt heavy for their size, how you could taste sunshine in a good tomato if you knew how to look for it. Every bunch of herbs reminded her of the garden her mother had kept, how Emma would be sent out to pick basil or thyme or rosemary, how the smell would stay on her fingers for hours. She'd tried to cook once, when she had arrived in Seattle. She'd bought ingredients for ratatouille, her mother's recipe, the one that took 3 hours and required patience and precision and love. She'd gotten as far as slicing the eggplant before she'd started crying and couldn't stop. The vegetables had rotted in her refrigerator, and she'd never tried again. At 7:15, she arrived at Maison Azure. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a luxury hotel, all marble and crystal and carefully curated elegance. It was the kind of place where tourists came to feel sophisticated, and tech executives came to impress clients, and couples came for anniversary dinners that would prove disappointing because no restaurant could live up to the expectations people brought with them. Emma always entered through the service entrance, changed into her uniform in the women's locker room, and clocked in at exactly 7:30. Punctuality was something she'd been trained in since childhood, her father's one useful legacy, his insistence that showing up on time was the minimum requirement for respect. though that respect hadn't saved him when the SEC started investigating, hadn't helped when the evidence of embezzlement became undeniable, hadn't stopped him from losing everything, including his family's trust. The pre-shift meeting was at 7:45. Sandra stood at the front of the kitchen, going over the day's specials, the reservations, the VIP guests they needed to watch for. She was 45, efficient, professional, the kind of manager who ran a tight ship and expected perfection. Emma had learned to stay under her radar, to be competent but not memorable, to avoid attention. And tonight, Sandra was saying, we have a major VIP, Laurent Beaumont, French billionaire, owns hotels and restaurants across Europe. He's dining alone at table 7 at 7:30. Marcus, you'll take care of him personally. Perfect service, perfect food. This is the kind of guest who can make or break our reputation with one review. Emma felt something flicker in her chest, interest maybe, or curiosity, then carefully extinguished it. VIP guests were Marcus's problem, not hers. She was assigned to tables 4 through 9 tonight, which meant she'd be close enough to watch the disaster unfold but not responsible for it. Perfect.
The day service was quiet. Maison Azure served lunch, but it was never busy. A few business meetings, some hotel guests, occasionally a tourist who'd read about the restaurant in a guidebook. Emma moved through her tables with practiced efficiency. She smiled when appropriate, made small talk when required, anticipated needs before guests asked. She was good at her job because being good meant being invisible, and being invisible meant being safe. Her lunch break came at 2:30. She ate quickly in the staff room, rice and beans from a container she'd brought from home, food that was fuel and nothing more. Some of the other servers chatted around her, talking about their plans, their lives, their dramas. Emma listened without engaging. There was Maria, who was saving money for nursing school. There was Jason, who was trying to make it as an actor and treated every shift like a performance. There was an older woman named Patricia who'd been serving for 30 years and had the kind of exhausted wisdom that came from watching people's lives play out across dinner tables. "You're quiet," Patricia said once, sitting next to Emma during a break. "You've been here 4 months and I still don't know anything about you." Not much to know, which was both true and the biggest lie she'd ever told. The dinner shift started at 5 p.m. The restaurant began to fill. Couples, groups, business dinners, a birthday party at table 12 that required singing and a candlelit dessert. Emma moved through it all like a dancer who'd learned the choreography so well she didn't have to think about it anymore. Smile, take orders, deliver food, clear plates, smile again, accept compliments on food she hadn't cooked, accept complaints about things she couldn't control. Smile, always smile. At 7:15, Marcus began preparing for Laurent Beaumont's arrival. He was nervous, Emma could tell, straightening his tie repeatedly, checking table 7 obsessively, making sure everything was perfect. Chef David had been in a panic all afternoon, redoing his bouillabaisse recipe 3 times, each version more cautious than the last. Emma had watched him working, had seen him reducing the saffron, tempering the garlic, filleting the fish into perfect, boneless portions. I had seen him making it polite, had felt that flutter in her chest again, the ghost of someone who used to care, who used to have opinions, who used to believe that food mattered. She'd crushed the feeling quickly. Caring was dangerous. Caring meant being vulnerable. Caring meant you could lose things, and Emma was done losing things. But then Laurent Beaumont had arrived, and everything had changed. Now, standing in the kitchen with her heart pounding and Rodriguez looking expectantly at her, Emma felt like she'd been split in two. Half of her was terrified. This was insane. She was going to fail. She was going to embarrass herself in front of a French billionaire and lose her job and have to start over again somewhere else with even less than she had now. But the other half, the half she'd been trying to kill for 4 months, was awake and alive and practically vibrating with excitement. "First," she said to Rodriguez, her voice steadier than she felt, "we need fish. Not the halibut Chef David uses. We need firm whitefish, monkfish if they have it, or John Dory, or at least sea bass and red snapper. We need variety. Go to the walk-in and bring me everything that looks good." Rodriguez nodded and disappeared.
Emma turned to the prep station, looking at what was available. Tomatoes. Good. They were fresh and ripe. Fennel. Yes, there was fennel. Onions, garlic, olive oil. But she needed more. She needed fish stock, and it needed to be real stock made from bones and heads, not the commercial stuff she could see on the shelf. "Chef David," she called out, "do you have fish bones, heads?" He looked up from the station where he was plating an order of coq au vin. "We get whole fish delivered. The heads and frames are in the trash." Emma's eyes widened. "You throw them away? What else would we do with them? Americans don't want to see fish heads." Emma bit back a response about waste and disrespect and the fundamental misunderstanding of what made good food good. Instead, she said, "Can I have them? All of them?" Chef David shrugged. "They're in the bins out back. You've got," he checked the clock, 1 hour and 53 minutes. Emma tied her apron tighter and headed for the back door. The dumpster area smelled like garbage and rain, and the bins were industrial-sized and half full. She found the fish waste quickly. Heads and frames from maybe a dozen different fish, scales still gleaming, eyes still relatively clear. They'd been thrown out maybe an hour ago. Perfect. She hauled 3 large frames and 4 heads back into the kitchen, ignoring the looks from the line cooks. Rodriguez had returned with a selection of fish: sea bass, red snapper, a small amount of monkfish, some halibut, because that's what they had. It wasn't perfect, but it would work. It would have to work. "Okay," Emma said, setting the fish heads on her station. "We make stock first. Help me rinse these." Rodriguez looked at the fish heads dubiously. "We're using those?" "The best bouillabaisse starts with the best stock, and the best stock comes from what most people throw away," Emma said. She was quoting her grandmother, could hear the old woman's voice as clearly as if she were standing in the kitchen. "Fish heads and bones have more flavor than the fillets. Americans forget this because they want everything clean and pretty, but French cooking, real French cooking, understands that the ugly parts are where the soul lives." They rinsed the heads and frames, then Emma set up a large stock pot. Olive oil first, heating until it shimmered. Then onions, chopped rough, and fennel, and carrots, and celery. She let them soften, watching them transform, feeling her hands remember movements they hadn't made in years. Add the fish heads and frames, let them cook slightly, breaking down. Then tomatoes, crushed by hand. Herbs, thyme, bay leaves, parsley stems she rescued from the trash where some cook had thrown them away after using the leaves. Water, brought to a boil, then reduced to a simmer. And then, this was crucial, saffron threads, real ones, bloomed in a small amount of hot water before being added to the pot. She could smell it immediately, that distinctive, slightly metallic, utterly irreplaceable scent of real saffron. It smelled like sunshine and dirt and something indefinable, something that could only be called essence. The stock needed 30 minutes minimum. While it simmered, Emma worked on the fish, cutting it into chunks, leaving the skin on because that's where flavor lived. She worked quickly, her knife skills coming back like muscle memory. She'd learned to break down fish when she was 12, her mother standing behind her, guiding her hands, teaching her to respect the ingredient, to waste nothing, to understand that every cut mattered. "You're good at that," Rodriguez said, watching her work. "I used to be. Long time ago." "Why'd you stop?" Emma didn't answer. How could she explain that she'd stopped because cooking reminded her of her mother, and her mother reminded her of family, and family reminded her of her father, and her father reminded her of loss and betrayal and the particular shame of being associated with someone who'd stolen from dozens of families, who'd destroyed retirements and college funds and futures? How could she explain that she'd stopped because cooking required you to believe you were worth something? And she'd stopped believing that the day her father was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The stock was coming together beautifully. Emma could tell by the smell, by the color, a deep golden orange, rich and complex. She strained it after 35 minutes, pressing on the solids to extract every bit of flavor. The result was maybe 2 quarts of liquid that looked like sunset and smelled like the ocean. In a clean pot, she started the actual bouillabaisse. More olive oil, more onions and fennel, this time chopped finely. Garlic, she minced 6 cloves, then added 3 more. You couldn't make bouillabaisse without courage, and courage meant garlic, lots of it. Tomatoes again, fresh ones this time, peeled and seeded and chopped, their juice running over her cutting board like blood. She added the stock, brought it to a boil, then added the firm fish first, monkfish and sea bass, the pieces that could handle longer cooking. Orange zest, grated fresh, more saffron, another generous pinch, because saffron wasn't meant to be subtle. Fennel seeds, crushed, a small dried pepper for heat. The kitchen had gone quiet around her. The line cooks were still working on regular service, but she could feel them watching, could sense Chef David hovering nearby, could see Marcus peeking through the door every few minutes to check on her progress. 10 minutes in, she added the more delicate fish, red snapper, the remaining halibut. The soup was bubbling gently, the fish poaching in the fragrant liquid. Emma tasted the broth, her first real taste of something she'd cooked in almost a decade. The flavor hit her like a wave, complex, layered, alive. It tasted like memory and salt and saffron sun. It tasted like her grandmother's kitchen in Lyon, like the summer she was 14 and had spent 6 weeks learning to cook properly, like the moment before everything fell apart. It needed more salt, a little more pepper, and pastis. Her grandmother had always added a splash of pastis at the end, that anise-flavored liquor that gave the soup its final dimension. Emma looked around the kitchen frantically. "Do you have Pernod? Ricard? Any pastis?" Chef David shook his head. "We have Sambuca."
Close enough. Emma added a careful splash, watched the liquid cloud slightly, then clear. She tasted again. Better. Not perfect. It would never be perfect. Not with the wrong fish and borrowed ingredients and a kitchen that wasn't hers. But it was real. It was honest. It tasted like something that mattered. Now for the rouille. Emma needed to work quickly. She had maybe 20 minutes left. She roasted red peppers directly over the burner flame, letting their skins char and blister. While they cooled, she made a simple aioli, egg yolks, garlic, so much garlic, lemon juice, salt, and olive oil drizzled in slowly while Rodriguez whisked frantically. The aioli came together thick and golden, smelling sharp and alive. She peeled the peppers, their skins sliding off easily, and blended them with the aioli, adding a pinch of cayenne for heat, a bit of saffron for color and flavor. The result was a vibrant orange-red sauce, creamy and intense. She tasted it on her finger and nearly groaned. It was perfect. Spicy, garlicky, rich enough to coat your tongue, bold enough to stand up to the fish. Bread. She needed bread. The par-baked nonsense Maison Azure served wouldn't work. "Rodriguez, is there a bakery nearby? A real one?" "Le Panier is 2 blocks away," he said. "French bakery. They're open until 9. Emma looked at the clock. 9:31. "Run, get a baguette, fresh as they have. Go now!" Rodriguez took off his apron and ran. Emma used the time to plate everything properly. This was a presentation, but not the overwrought, architectural presentation that American fine dining loved. This was a rustic, honest presentation, the way it would be served in Marseille, in a small restaurant by the harbor where fishermen ate after their morning catch. She found wide, shallow bowls. She sliced more garlic cloves paper thin. She chopped fresh parsley. She made sure everything was ready. Rodriguez burst back through the door at 9:42, clutching a still warm baguette. Emma grabbed it, sliced it thickly, rubbed each piece with raw garlic, and grilled them quickly on the flat top. The smell of toasting bread and garlic filled the kitchen, drowning out everything else. At 9:46, Emma arranged everything on a large wooden board, the traditional way. The soup in its bowl, steam rising. The fish pieces arranged on a separate platter, each chunk glistening with broth and saffron. The rouille in a small ceramic dish. The grilled bread piled high. Small bowls of grated Gruyere, even though that was technically more Parisian than Marseillaise, but she was adapting, improvising, making it work. She looked at what she'd created and felt her chest tighten. It wasn't just food, it was a piece of her soul, a confession, a vulnerability she'd sworn she'd never show again. It was proof that she was still alive under all the layers of protection she'd built up. And that was terrifying. "It's time," Chef David said quietly. He was looking at her work with something like wonder in his eyes. "Emma, this is really something." Emma nodded, unable to speak. She lifted the board carefully, balanced it, and walked toward the kitchen doors. Rodriguez held them open for her. The dining room beyond was still full. Sandra had decided to keep the restaurant open after all, though she'd quietly comped everyone's meals for the inconvenience, turning Laurent's dramatic challenge into an unexpected dinner theater. Every eye turned to Emma as she emerged from the kitchen. She crossed the dining room slowly, carefully, her whole world narrowed to the board in her hands and the man waiting at table 7. Laurent Beaumont sat exactly where he'd been sitting an hour and 53 minutes ago, his gray eyes tracking her progress across the room. His assistant, Margot, had a notebook open. Marcus stood nearby, looking like he might pass out from anxiety. Emma reached table 7 and set down the board. She arranged everything carefully: the soup, the fish platter, the rouille, the bread, the cheese. She was aware of her hands shaking slightly, aware of the absolute silence in the dining room, aware that this moment might define something important about who she was and who she might become. "Bouillabaisse Marseillaise," Emma said in French, her voice quiet but clear. "The way my grandmother taught me, the way it's meant to be, fierce, bold, uncompromising. You eat it like this: spread the rouille on the bread, put it in the bowl, ladle the soup over it, add the fish. The flavors should hit you in waves: garlic, saffron, the sea, heat, richness. It's not polite, it's not gentle, but it's true." Laurent didn't move for a long moment. He just looked at the food, his expression unreadable. Then he picked up a piece of bread, spread it thickly with rouille, not carefully, but generously, the way someone who understood the dish would, and placed it in his bowl. He ladled the soup over it, watching the bread soak up the liquid. He added pieces of fish, the monkfish and sea bass and snapper, breaking apart slightly, their flesh white and perfectly cooked. He lifted the spoon to his mouth.
Laurent tasted the bouillabaisse, and something shifted in his face. The hardness softened, the skepticism dissolved. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were bright with something Emma couldn't quite name. He took another spoonful, then another. He broke off more bread, spread more rouille, added more fish. He ate methodically, seriously, the way someone eats when food is more than food, when it's memory and meaning and connection to something larger than themselves. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, Laurent set down his spoon and looked directly at Emma. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. "When I was 8 years old," he said in French, "my mother took me to Marseille. We were poor then. This was before everything changed, before my father's business succeeded. We stayed with my uncle, a fisherman, in a small house near the old port. Every Sunday he made bouillabaisse, exactly like this. The smell would fill the entire house, and we'd sit around the table, me, my mother, my uncle, his 3 children, and we'd eat until we couldn't move. It was the happiest time of my childhood." He paused, his finger tracing the rim of the bowl. "My uncle died 30 years ago. My mother died 10 years ago. I've eaten at the finest restaurants in the world, have employed the best chefs, have tasted everything you can imagine. But I haven't tasted this truth, this honesty, in 3 decades. Emma felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. She didn't trust herself to speak. Laurent continued, his eyes never leaving hers. You understand something that most chefs spend their entire careers trying to learn. Food is not about technique, though technique matters. It's not about presentation, though presentation has its place. Food is about memory, about love, about taking something as simple as fish and vegetables and transforming it into communion. He stood up, and Emma instinctively took a step back. But he wasn't angry. He was reaching into his jacket, pulling out a business card, and handing it to her with both hands, a gesture of respect. I own a hotel in Paris, the Hotel Beaumont. It has a restaurant that used to be magnificent, but the chef retired last year and we haven't found a replacement. Everyone we interview knows how to cook, but no one understands why we cook. You understand. I would like to offer you a position as executive chef. The words didn't make sense at first. Emma stared at the card, heavy stock, embossed lettering, an address in the 8th arrondissement, and tried to process what she was hearing. I'm a waitress, she heard herself say. You're a chef who's been waiting. There's a difference. I haven't run a kitchen and I've never run a kitchen. But you know food. You understand it. The rest can be learned. Laurent sat back down, gesturing at the chair across from him. Sit, please. Let's talk. Emma sat, aware that everyone in the restaurant was watching, that Sandra looked like she'd witnessed a miracle, that Marcus was grinning like an idiot, that Chef David was standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed and his expression thoughtful. I can't just move to Paris. I have a life here. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She didn't have a life here. She had existence, survival, a daily routine designed to keep her from feeling anything too deeply. But moving to Paris meant stepping back into the world, meant being visible again, meant risking everything she'd carefully protected herself from. You have fear, Laurent said bluntly. I recognize it because I felt it. After my first business failed, I spent 2 years working as a bookkeeper, hiding from risk, hiding from possibility. The only thing that saved me was someone seeing who I could be and refusing to let me stay small. He leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. I don't know what you're running from. I don't need to know. But I know talent when I see it, and I know waste when I see it. You have a gift, Emma, a real one, and you're wasting it serving other people's food to people who don't appreciate it. Emma's throat was tight. She thought about her studio apartment, her mattress on the floor, her deliberate poverty of ambition. She thought about her mother, who died believing Emma would become a great chef. She thought about her father, rotting in federal prison, his name synonymous with betrayal. She thought about the last 9 years of her life spent running from anything that might make her feel alive. I need time, she whispered, to think about it. Of course, the position won't be available until January anyway. We're renovating the restaurant. That gives you 3 months. But Emma waited until she met his eyes. Don't let fear make this decision. Fear is a terrible advisor. He stood again, and this time Margot stood with him, closing her notebook with a soft snap. Laurent pulled out his wallet and placed 50 $100 bills on the table, the promised payment for the closed restaurant time, though Emma suspected he'd spend nowhere near 2 hours. Keep the bouillabaisse, he told Sandra, who'd approached the table. Let your staff eat it. Let them taste what real cooking is supposed to be. He turned back to Emma. And you, go home, rest, think. My card has my personal number. Call me when you decide.
He left the restaurant like a storm passing, Margot trailing behind him, the door closing with a soft pneumatic sigh. The silence he left behind was profound, almost religious. Then everyone started talking at once.
The other servers crowded around Emma, asking questions, touching the empty bowls Laurent had left behind. Marcus was laughing and shaking his head in disbelief. Chef David was ladling himself a bowl of the remaining bouillabaisse, tasting it with the serious expression of someone evaluating their own assumptions. Rodriguez was already telling the story to one of the line cooks, his hands gesturing wildly. Sandra approached Emma slowly, her expression complex, part impressed, part calculating, part something that might have been respected. "That was unexpected," she said. "I'm sorry," Emma replied automatically. "I know I shouldn't have—" "You should have," Sandra interrupted. "You absolutely should have. Do you know how many restaurants would kill for a review from Laurent Beaumont? For his approval? You just gave us the kind of publicity money can't buy." She paused, studying Emma with new eyes. "How long have you been working here?" "4 months. And before that?" Emma hesitated. "I wasn't working." "But you trained somewhere. You learned from someone." "My mother, my grandmother. Just family, really." Sandra shook her head slowly. "Just family, as if that's a small thing." She glanced at the kitchen, at Chef David, then back to Emma. "David's contract is up in 6 months. He's a good chef, but he's not great. I've been thinking about what direction to take the restaurant. I think you just showed me." Emma felt panic rising. "Miss Cho, I'm not qualified to—" "Not yet," Sandra agreed, "but you could be, if you wanted to be." She smiled slightly. "Think about it. Meanwhile, you're off the floor. Starting Monday, you work in the kitchen. I want you training with David, learning the operation, seeing if this is something you actually want." Before Emma could respond, Patricia appeared at her elbow carrying 2 bowls of bouillabaisse. "Come on, honey," the older woman said gently. "You've earned dinner. Come sit with those of us who've been watching you disappear for 4 months and talk to us. Really talk to us." Emma let herself be led to the staff room where half the front-of-house team had gathered, where Rodriguez was already eating his 3rd bowl of soup, where Jason was dramatically reenacting Laurent's arrival and departure. Someone had opened a bottle of wine, probably against regulations, but tonight felt like regulations didn't apply. Patricia sat Emma down and put a bowl in front of her. "Eat your own cooking," she commanded. "Then tell us who you are, the real story." Emma picked up her spoon with shaking hands. She tasted the bouillabaisse she'd made, and it was like tasting truth. It wasn't perfect. The fish could have been better. The saffron could have been more expensive. The timing could have been more precise. But it was honest. It was hers. It was real. "My name is Emma Rose Whitmore," she began, and realized she was using her full name for the first time in Seattle, not hiding behind just Emma, not trying to be forgettable. But it used to be Emma Whitmore Beauchamp. My father's name was Theodore Beauchamp. Maybe you heard about him. About 5 years ago, he was all over the news for embezzling $47 million from his clients. The staff room went quiet. Patricia's hand found Emma's shoulder, squeezed gently. "My mother was Marie-Claire Beauchamp. She was a chef trained in Lyon, ran a small catering company in Boston. She died when I was 19, cancer, aggressive. Took her in 4 months. I was studying at BU, thinking about transferring to culinary school, thinking I might actually be good at something." Emma's voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "After she died, my father fell apart. Or maybe he'd been falling apart already and we just couldn't see it. The embezzlement had been going on for years. They arrested him 6 months after Mom died. The trial was everywhere. Every news outlet, every website. Our family name became synonymous with fraud." She took another spoonful of soup, let the warmth ground her. "I dropped out of school, changed my name legally, kept Whitmore, which was my mother's maiden name, dropped Beauchamp. I worked random jobs for a few years, never staying anywhere long, never letting anyone know me. Then I came to Seattle 4 months ago, got this job, and decided I'd just stop trying, stop wanting things. Stop believing I deserved anything good. Maria, the server saving for nursing school, spoke up quietly. But you do deserve good things. What your father did, that's not on you. I know that intellectually, but knowing it and believing it are different things. Jason leaned forward, his theatrical nature gentled by genuine curiosity. So what are you going to do? About Paris, I mean. About the job offer.
Emma looked around the room, at these people who'd worked alongside her for 4 months without really knowing her, who'd accepted her silence and her invisibility without pushing, who were now offering her something she'd forgotten existed. Community, connection, belonging. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to run. It's what I've been doing for years. But another part of me... She trailed off, remembering the feel of the knife in her hand, the smell of the stock simmering, the moment Laurent had closed his eyes while tasting her food. Another part of me remembers why I wanted to cook in the first place. It wasn't about being successful or famous, or even about making money. It was about making people feel something. About creating communion, like Laurent said. About taking pain and beauty and memory and transforming it into something nourishing. Rodriguez, who'd been quiet, spoke up. That stock you made, from the fish heads we throw away every day, that was the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. And I grew up in my abuela's kitchen in Oaxaca, where we made everything from scratch, where nothing was wasted. You showed me something tonight, that the ugly parts, the parts we throw away, that's where the flavor is. That's where the truth is. Emma felt tears finally spill over, and for once, she didn't try to stop them. She let herself cry in front of these people who'd become, without her noticing, something like friends. She let herself feel the weight of the last 9 years, the grief she'd been carrying, the fear she'd been nurturing, the small, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be more than her father's daughter and her mother's ghost. Patricia handed her a napkin. Listen to me, because I'm old and I've seen a lot of lives pass through restaurants. The worst thing you can do is let someone else's mistakes define your story. Your father made choices, terrible choices that hurt people, but you didn't make those choices. You get to make your own. And tonight, you chose courage. You chose to step forward instead of back. That matters. Emma wiped her eyes, laughed shakily. I'm a mess. We're all messes, Jason said cheerfully. That's what makes us interesting. They sat together for another hour, eating bouillabaisse and drinking wine and telling stories. Emma learned that Maria had 3 kids and was working 3 jobs to put herself through school. She learned that Jason had been disowned by his family for being gay and had built his own family in the theater community. She learned that Rodriguez had crossed the border alone at 15 and was now sending money home to his mother in Oaxaca. She learned that Patricia had lost her husband to Vietnam and her son to suicide, and had decided that if she was going to survive, she might as well help others survive too. She learned that everyone was carrying something, that everyone had scars, that the question wasn't whether you'd been broken, but what you chose to do with the pieces. When she finally left the restaurant at midnight, Emma walked the 20 blocks home instead of taking the bus. The October air was cool and damp, typical Seattle weather, but it felt clarifying, like it was washing something away. She thought about Laurent's offer, about Sandra's proposal, about the choice she'd been avoiding for 9 years, the choice to step back into life, with all its risk and possibility. Her studio apartment looked different when she unlocked the door. The mattress on the floor, the card table, the single chair, they suddenly seemed less like minimalism and more like punishment. This wasn't simple living. It was self-imposed exile. She'd been treating herself like she deserved nothing, like she was serving a sentence for crimes she hadn't committed. Then she searched for her mother. Marie Claire Beauchamp Chef, Boston. The results were sparse. A few articles about her catering company, some photos from events she'd worked,
an obituary that described her as beloved wife and mother, talented chef, taken too soon. Emma clicked on one of the photos, her mother at a charity event, standing behind a table laden with food. She was smiling, her dark hair pulled back, her hands gesturing as she explained something to a guest. She looked alive, passionate, fully herself. "I miss you," Emma whispered to the image. "I miss you so much. And I'm sorry I stopped cooking. I'm sorry I gave up on everything you taught me. I thought if I stopped caring about food, I'd stop missing you. But it doesn't work like that, does it?" Her mother's smile in the photo seemed to hold an answer. Nothing works like that. Love doesn't disappear just because you deny it. Passion doesn't fade just because you ignore it. You carry the people you've lost inside you, whether you acknowledge them or not. The only question is whether you'll let them inspire you or haunt you. Emma opened her email and began typing, writing to the one person who'd tried to stay in contact over the years, the one friend from before everything fell apart who'd refused to give up on her. "Dear Sophie," she wrote, "I know it's been 2 years since I responded to your emails. I'm sorry. I've been hiding, and I thought if I cut everyone off from my old life, I could somehow become a new person. Turns out, you can't run from yourself. Tonight something happened." She wrote for an hour, telling Sophie everything, about the bouillabaisse, about Laurent, about the choice she was facing. When she finished, she hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she picked up Laurent's business card and sent a text to the number printed on it. "Mr. Beaumont, this is Emma Whitmore from Maison Azure. I'd like to discuss the Paris position. Would you have time for a phone call this week?" The response came within minutes, despite it being past midnight. "Emma, yes. Call me tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time. We'll talk. LB." Emma set down her phone and looked around her apartment again. For the first time in 4 months, it didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like a launching pad, temporary by design, a space she'd needed, but not a space she was meant to stay in forever. She had 3 months until the Paris position opened. 3 months to decide if she had the courage to step back into the world. 3 months to learn how to be a chef instead of a waitress. 3 months to figure out if Emma Whitmore could be someone other than Theodore Beauchamp's daughter and Marie-Claire Beauchamp's bereaved child. 3 months to answer the questions she'd been avoiding. What did she want? Not what was safe, not what was easy, but what did she actually, truly want? Emma looked at the French press on her counter, thought about her mother's hands showing her how to pour, thought about her grandmother's kitchen in Lyon, thought about the way Laurent Beaumont had closed his eyes when he tasted something real. She thought about Rodriguez saying that the ugly parts were where the flavor was, where the truth was. And she thought maybe, just maybe, she was ready to stop throwing away the ugly parts of herself. Maybe she was ready to see if they could be transformed into something nourishing, something true, something that tasted like communion. The morning after Laurent Beaumont's visit, Emma woke to 47 unread messages. The first was from Sophie, who'd responded to Emma's late-night email with 3 paragraphs of capital letters and exclamation points, essentially screaming digital joy that Emma was finally emerging from her self-imposed isolation. The rest were from numbers she didn't recognize, tech bloggers who'd somehow heard about the bouillabaisse incident, food writers asking for interviews, even a producer from a local morning show wanting Emma to appear and recreate the dish live on air. She deleted them all, except Sophie's. She wasn't ready for that kind of attention. Might never be ready. The whole point of coming to Seattle was anonymity, and now she'd accidentally made herself visible. The irony wasn't lost on her. She made coffee and stared at her phone, willing herself to call Laurent at the appointed time. She had 4 hours to decide what she was going to say. 4 hours to figure out if she had the courage to say yes to Paris or the wisdom to say no. Instead of deciding, she went to Pike Place Market. It was Saturday, her day off from Maison Azure, and the market was crowded with tourists and locals, vendors calling out prices, the smell of fresh fish and coffee and cinnamon rolls thick in the air. Emma walked through it differently this time, not as a ghost passing through, but as someone actually looking, actually seeing. She stopped at a fish stall where a woman with weathered hands was arranging salmon and halibut on ice. Emma studied the fish, noticing things she'd trained herself not to notice for months. The clarity of the eyes, the color of the gills, the way light played off the scales. The fish were beautiful, and for once, letting herself acknowledge that beauty didn't hurt.
"You know fish," the vendor said, watching Emma's examination. "My mother taught me," Emma replied, "how to choose them, how to respect them." The vendor smiled, a gap between her front teeth. "Not many people understand that second part anymore. Everyone wants their food to look pretty, but they don't want to think about where it comes from, don't want to acknowledge the life that was given." Emma nodded, feeling a kinship with this stranger. "I've been avoiding fish, avoiding cooking at all, really, for a long time." "Why?" The question was simple, direct, without judgment. Emma found herself answering honestly. "Because cooking reminded me of everything I'd lost. My mother, my family, the person I thought I was going to be." The vendor was quiet for a moment, then said, "My husband died 3 years ago. The fishermen went out one morning and didn't come back. The storm came up fast, they never found the body. After that, I couldn't go to the market for 6 months, couldn't look at fish, couldn't smell the ocean. That if I stayed away, it would hurt less." "Did it?" "No, just made me lonelier." The woman's hands moved over the fish, gentle and sure. What helped was coming back, remembering that he loved this, the market, the fish, the life we built here. Remembering that avoiding something doesn't make it gone, just make it bigger in your head. Emma felt her eyes sting. "I'm supposed to make a decision today about whether to take a job in Paris. Cooking job. The kind I always dreamed about when I was younger." "Then what's the question?" "Whether I deserve it. Whether I'm good enough. Whether I have the right to step back into that world after everything that happened." The vendor fixed Emma with a steady look. "Did you do something wrong?" "No. But my father did. Terrible things." "Are you your father?" "No." "Then stop carrying his debts." The woman wrapped a piece of salmon in paper, handed it to Emma. "This is fresh. Came in this morning. Take it. Cook it tonight. Don't think about whether you deserve it. Just cook it and eat it. And remember that nourishing yourself isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. You can't feed others if you're starving yourself." Emma tried to pay, but the vendor waved her off. "Just promise me you'll stop punishing yourself for someone else's crimes." Emma left the market with the salmon, her eyes blurry, her heart feeling bruised but somehow lighter. She walked to her apartment, and for the first time in 4 months, she actually cooked for herself. She made it simply, the salmon seasoned with just salt and pepper, seared in a hot pan with butter and thyme, finished in the oven. She made a salad with greens from the market, a simple vinaigrette with good olive oil and lemon juice. She set the card table with a real plate instead of eating from the container. She poured water into an actual glass. She sat down and ate slowly, tasting each bite, letting herself feel nourished. The salmon was perfect. Crispy skin, tender flesh, the thyme adding just enough complexity. It was such a simple dish, but Emma had made it with intention, with care, with the kind of attention that transforms cooking from task to meditation. When she finished, she washed the dish, dried it, put it away. Then she picked up her phone and dialed Laurent Beaumont's number. He answered on the second ring. "Emma, I hoped you would call." His voice was different on the phone, warmer, less formal than the imperious billionaire who'd nearly walked out of Maison Azure.
Emma found herself relaxing slightly. "I've been thinking about your offer, about Paris. And I'm terrified. I haven't run a kitchen. I don't have formal training. She paused, decided to be honest. "I'm damaged goods, Mr. Beaumont. My father is in federal prison for embezzlement. My real name, is associated with one of the biggest financial scandals Boston has seen in decades. If you hire me and someone connects the dots, it could hurt your hotel's reputation." Laurent was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Let me tell you something about reputation, Emma. I've built my fortune on luxury hotels, on catering to the wealthy, on understanding what makes people willing to pay premium prices. And I've learned that reputation is complex. Yes, association with scandal can damage reputation.
But do you know what damages it more? Mediocrity, playing it safe, hiring people who are technically competent but spiritually empty." He paused, and Emma heard what sounded like coffee being poured. "The restaurant at Hotel Beaumont has been merely good for too long. Good is the enemy of great. Good is forgettable. I'm offering you this position because I believe you could be exceptional, not because you're qualified. On paper, you're completely unqualified. But you understand food at a level most trained chefs never reach. You cook with truth, with soul. Experienced chefs come with habits. They follow trends, chase stars, worry about critics. You only know how to cook with honesty. That's rare, Emma. That's valuable." "I might fail," Emma whispered. "You will certainly fail," Laurent said calmly. "Not the restaurant overall, I hope, but you'll fail in specific ways, on specific days. This is guaranteed. The question isn't whether you'll fail. The question is whether you'll have the courage to fail at something that matters." Emma found herself smiling despite her fear. "You're very blunt. I don't have time for games. The rest we can build around." "What would it actually involve?" "The position." Laurent's tone became more businesslike. "The Hotel Beaumont restaurant is currently closed for renovation. It will reopen in January. Between now and then, you would come to Paris. I'll pay for housing, visa, relocation costs. You would work with my consulting chef, Marcus Thierry, who has 3 Michelin stars and more patience than any person should possess. He'll teach you the operational side, managing staff, ordering, costs, service flow, all the technical aspects you haven't learned." He continued, and Emma could hear papers rustling. "You'll have full creative control of the menu, but you'll collaborate with Marcus on execution and presentation. The restaurant seats 80. We'll aim for 1 Michelin star in the first year, ambitious but achievable. Your salary will be 90,000 euros to start, with performance bonuses if we hit certain metrics. You'll have full staff, sous chef, line cooks, prep crew, front of house. Your job is to create the vision. Their job is to help execute it." 90,000 euros, Emma did the quick math, roughly $100,000. More than she'd ever made in her life, more than she dreamed of making. It felt surreal. "Why me?" Emma asked. "You could hire any number of experienced chefs, people who actually know what they're doing." "Because experienced chefs come with habits," Laurent said. "They know what's supposed to work, so they do what's supposed to work. They follow trends, chase stars, worry about critics. You don't have those habits yet. You only know how to cook with honesty. That's rare, Emma. That's valuable." Emma looked around her studio apartment, at the sparse furniture and bare walls, at the life she'd built out of fear and retreat. Then she thought about Paris, a city she'd visited once, years ago, before everything fell apart. She thought about the Seine at sunset, about cobblestone streets and cafe terraces, about the feeling of her mother's hand in hers as they walked through the Marais. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said. "When you were eating the bouillabaisse last night, you said it reminded you of your uncle, of being 8 years old in Marseille. What happened to that boy? How did he become this?" She gestured even though he couldn't see her, indicating his wealth, his empire, his position. Laurent laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. "That boy grew up poor and hungry and determined. My father's business succeeded when I was 13, importing textiles. Nothing glamorous, but profitable. I learned young that money changes everything and nothing. We had more comfort, more opportunity, but we weren't happier. My mother still misses Marseille, still talks about the old days like they were paradise instead of poverty. His voice softened. I built my fortune trying to recreate what we'd lost. That sense. Emma took a breath, and the words came more easily than she expected. I'll come to Paris. I'll take the position. Excellent. She could hear Laurent smile through the phone. I'll have Margot send you the contract details and arrange your relocation. Plan to arrive by November 1st. That gives you a month to prepare. After they hung up, Emma sat in the quiet of her apartment, feeling the weight and lightness of her decision simultaneously. She looked at the French press on her counter, thought about her mother's hands showing her how to pour, thought about her grandmother's kitchen in Lyon, thought about the way Laurent Beaumont had closed his eyes when he tasted something real. She thought about Rodriguez saying that the ugly parts were where the flavor was, where the truth was, and she thought maybe, just maybe, she was ready to stop throwing away the ugly parts of herself. Maybe she was ready to see if they could be transformed into something nourishing, something true, something that tasted like communion. She didn't know if she'd succeed. She didn't know if she was ready. But for the first time in 9 years, she was willing to find out. And that, she thought, was enough. Thank you so much for listening to Emma's story. If it moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others. We put our hearts into every story we tell, and your time and support make it all worthwhile. See you in the next one.